All right, now we're back with the study stream and the recording is on. Yeah, it was a fast session due to the previous one due to schedule issues. Everything changed on this morning. Sorry for that. But we're going to check the strategy on board on the flop for big blind out of position, then 6 deuce versus button. And we can see that on Vision PLO 200 rate, solver strategy needs 16% from the big blind. And then I have some sims here. Let's open up the first one. There's the normal sim. This is the same situation with 4.25% rate. This is PLO 25 zoom rate. On party poker, the rate is 5%. With, I think the cap might be even higher. Who knows? But this is definitely higher rate. But we can see that big blind still leads 15%. So quite a high donking percentage. And then if we check, and the button bets pretty much 50-50, then on the Vision solver there's 15% check raise. And with higher rate, 13% raise, a bit lower. But then I also made a sim where we don't have a leading range. Let's open up here. So now the big blind checks his whole range. And now we can see, of course, what happens. The first thing is that button doesn't see bet that much. Normally, button would see bet 50%. But now, when the opponent doesn't donk, it see bets less. Although we're talking about the big blind, the pool player strategy today, then it's good to understand. Yeah, I'm checking the EV in a bit. But it's good to understand that there are a lot of players, especially in small stakes, who doesn't donk as a default. I would say that probably 80% of the players in heads-up pots, they check their whole range. And therefore, their checking range has strong hands, more strong hands in them than there would be if they have a balanced donking range, leading range here. So solver C bets way less. From 50 it drops to 41, which is quite a high. It's 20% less C betting. And this is good to remember when you just check out the solver strategy on the flops. Okay, we should C bet here 50%. If opponent doesn't donk, you shouldn't C bet 50%. Then you should drop down. We have a sim where the c-bet frequency is forced to be higher even without the big blind donking strategy, and we can see how it affects the EV. But Shadow Maniac asked, what's the EV difference between these two strategies? And let me put it here. And here on the left we have the no donking strategy. Then on the right we have the option to donk. And big blind EV is virtually the same. It doesn't really change. What's curious is that if we don't have a donking strategy, then button EV increases with almost 10 BPs per 100. Yeah, same rate and everything. And when I saw this, that okay, big blind EV doesn't change, then it drops a little. It's actually higher with check, which is weird. And the volatility is quite low, so it should be conversed very well. And I wondered, how can button have a higher EV when we don't donk? But I think the reason is that when we don't donk, there are less big pots, which means less rate. We don't see the rate here, which is average rate per hand post flop. But when we don't donk, then the chance of pot getting bigger goes down. So more pots are won on the flop. More pots are won on the turn when the pot is smaller than it would be if we have a donking range. And therefore, the rate we pay in the end, totaling, is less, which means less rate, more EV from the pot. So I think that's the reason. But if we are big blind, we don't care about the button EV or rate. But the interesting thing is that if we play both strategies balanced and opponent adjusts in the correct way, understanding how he needs to change if we don't ever donk, the big blind EV is quite the same. And I think that's the most important stuff out of all these sims today, is you can have standard to check your whole range and it doesn't really hurt you in the long run that much. It's not like decreasing your EV a lot. Or in other ways, you don't have to donk to make money at small stakes. But if you start to donk, you might lose money if you're not balanced. But then when we open a sim where the opponent C bets 55%, that's the highest I could get it easily this time. So normally, if we don't ever donk, it's here. When we check our whole range, opponent should see, but I hope you can see it. It's so small. I hope you have a big ass television, because my zooming doesn't work at the moment, I think. No, it goes to the different monitor. Too bad. But normally the button should see bet here 40%. But when we have the sim, let me put it up here. This is the sim where we check opponent is forced to bet 55%. Yeah, it's boards that favor big blind. This is only one board, but I don't know what boards favor big blind. This is, I checked through some boards which are not paired, monotone or straight boards, and I could get the highest lead-in percentage, 16 on this board. Well, there might be higher. I didn't go through all the 40 boards on Vision, but this one has one of the highest lead-in ranges, which means that the board favors big blind range the most. So this is probably one of those boards where not having a donking range would hurt the most. And on this board it doesn't hurt at all, so I think I would be amazed if on average there would be huge difference on any board. I would be amazed. It's possible, but I would be kind of amazed. But here, the same sim as this previous one. We check our whole range. Normally opponent should bet 40%. Now opponent bets 55. I tried to force it to 60, which is probably closer what average opponent does on small stakes. They see bet these boards way too much. I mean, there's a lot of reps who see bet here close to 100, 80, 85% easily. But I didn't force it too high, but now it bets slightly more. Now what happens is big blind's check raising frequency goes up a lot, up to 22, and versus normal C bet it's only 15. So our check raising range doesn't really go up that much. With the leading range, this is the normal sim. When we check button bets, we check raise 13%. Here button bets 50% of his hands, and we raise 13%. But when we have, now I lost it. God damn it. No, this is not. This is the forced frequency. Now when opponent C bets slightly more, 55, even more than solver would propose, 50% normally, if opponent c-bets a bit more than solver would, we can see that our check raising frequency starts to go up a lot. So if we have this no check strategy, no donk strategy, sorry, no check strategy would be wild. But if we check our whole range and opponent c-bets a bit too much, we can see that even solver starts to raise a lot more hands than normally. It goes up from 15 to 21, and you might think, oh, 6%, what's the deal? Well, that 6% is 40% of the hand more. So our frequency goes up 40%. Or 30%. Well, anyway, it goes up a lot. 40%. Yeah. And when opponent overbets, now the EV of big blind is 278. It was 279 on the previous ones. Or 278.9. So the big blind EV doesn't really change much. What happens is that button EV doesn't change much compared to normal and balanced strategy. But if we compare to no checking strategy, if he c-bets much, his EV goes down a little. Now there's way more bigger pots, more rate. But what you can see that our EV doesn't really change that much. It's just if opponent bets too much, we need to raise more. If we would raise only 15%, then our EV would go down. Yeah, the button EV goes down from normal no donk situation. But when we compare the button EV, this is the normal, where we have a leading range, everything is balanced. Button EV is 377. Now, when we check our whole range and he c-bets too much, it's still the kind of same. 376.6. But we can see that if opponent c-bets too much, then we check raise a bit more. And now when we see that if we check our range and opponent bets too much, we defend around 60% of hands. We fold 42. In normal situations, versus c-bet, we defend 50% of hands. So this is how it works. If opponent bets too much, we defend more. Otherwise, he's exploiting us. And then in no donking strategy, we still defend close to 50%. But as soon as opponent starts to bet a bit too much, we need to defend more or he's running us over. And now, the thing is, if we know what opponent should c-bet, then we can see if he's c-betting too much. But quite often, we can see it, where's the, okay, this is the no donking, we can use this one. Opponent should check hands like, let's see, pocket aces is a check 63% of times on the button on this board. Now, pretty much when he doesn't connect with the board heavily. There are some weird aces with flush draw and deuce, that's a check, but we can see that quite often aces with the flush draw is a bet most of the times. But still, over half of the aces should be checked back on this board. Now, I'm quite sure that most small stakes players, if they were on the button with aces, they would bet this flop. I'm quite sure. And if you can see that, then you know that, okay, same with pocket kings, same with pocket queens. A lot of checkbacks. But if opponent c-bets most of his overpairs, then we know that, okay, he's probably c-betting a bit too much. Yo, hello Kitana. No one has seen me on AGs except on poker strategy streams. And the idea was to stream on pretty much daily basis for the summer. Because I'm running poker every day, a few hours. to have some kind of social life and fun. But that changed. Suddenly we had the option to adopt 2 dogs from Ukraine that were saved from the war, and now they're moving in with us today, and it means that we can't leave them alone. We have to start by really short periods of time, like we go out to take the trash out and come back in. So we have to be at home with them in the beginning most of the time, and then gradually build up that they are alone. They have probably never lived in an apartment with humans, because first time they came to visit our home and just to get know and used to places, they were watching TV like, what the fuck is that? They were sitting in front of TV with, you know how dogs are when they are wondering something, their head tilts. And they were wondering, what is this? And sometimes you can see something on the TV, and when it's closed off, it reflects their own image. They were wondering, and then there were these speakers on the side of television, and they were wondering, what is that small box that creates some noises? They were super interested in those. Probably haven't ever seen a TV before. So there's a lot of things they need to learn and adapt to. And that means, as I'm not streaming at our home, I'm streaming on the garage, then I can't be here for a few hours in the beginning. So if I want to stream, I have to do it in the home, but then there's other people, so I'm not sure how it works. So the plan to stream every day kind of changed. But that's life. And now I totally forgot what we were doing. Oh yeah, we were talking about how to spot if opponent is c-betting too much. Then probably hands like ace, king, queen, jack. That's a hand that people often c-bet on these boards. Like, okay, I have just overcards, but maybe I can steal the pot. High frequency check back. 80%, over 80%. People c-bet those hands way too much. Any 10, well, that's a high frequency bet. Probably people would do that. Wouldn't be surprised. Some people see bet any hand with 10, like we have here 10 deuce hand. That should be high frequency check back. 60% people probably see bet 10 deuce every time. So it's quite easy to spot when people see bet too much. Then let's say heart with the flush draw is 50% check check. A lot of reps see bet any flush draw here. So I'm quite sure that on this board the actual c-bet frequency might be a lot higher than what's over assumes, which means the way we adjust is we defend more and we start to check raise more, assuming opponent folds. And then I have one more sim. Now, I wish you could, like label, give different background colors on the sims. That would be nice. Or change the table color here. So you could just stay on track what sim is what. So now I'm going to open one more sim where this is the average no donk. Normal, when we check our whole range, it's this sim you see here. And if opponent bets and we check raise, we can see that, oh, we have the hearts on. I wondered, why do we fold only 3%? Well, it's with the flush draw. We fold half of the hands. And our fold equity is 50%. Then I checked on poker tools, like how often, if we keep a bit wide calling range for people, or continuation range, sorry, means calling range and re-raising range, then it's around 45% on this board when it's kind of wide. All the made hands of 10 or better, like with any kind of cut shot or something, any two pair, any set, any flush draw, any straight draw. then it gave the fold equity of around 55%. So then I made a sim, which you can see here. I'm sorry, this might be confusing because all the sims look like the same, and I'm not sure if you have a small monitor, can you see the numbers? But I tried to force 60% fold equity to make the difference to 50. And solver could get it up to 58. So it's close to 60%, which might be... It's closer to the truth. I'm quite sure that average opponent folds even a bit more. They fold just some random flush draws and so on. It's funny that you can see here 10 deuce with nut flush draw is a fold, and even with when it has a blocker with the straight draw. Ace 10 deuce with the nut flush draw is a fold, which is super weird. But yeah, when we force a fold equity, it starts to fold hands that probably shouldn't be folds. So that's why node locking certain frequencies kind of might ruin the sim a bit. But if we force the opponent to fold to a check raise, then we can see from the EV, let's put these on so you can see here. Here's the EV. Big blind EV goes up almost 30 big blinds per 100. And then when we know that opponent is folding a lot, we're check raising 18%. So the funny thing is that when opponent c-bets a bit more, we start to raise more. When opponent c-bets with more balanced range, but kind of overfolds to check raises, we still check raise a bit more. And I would say that versus most opponents at small stakes, either one or both of them are actually true. And I'm quite sure that versus most opponents, they c-bet a bit too much and they overfold to check raises, which means that suddenly our check raising frequency should be a bit wider, kind of 20%. And the funny thing is, before solvers, I always had this rule of thumb that in heads-up pots, our check raising should be around 20%. And it's actually quite close what solver wants to do. Yeah, I have a Discord. But it has been quite quiet. Because I started, let me see if I can send a new link. It has been a bit quiet because I started a day job last August, which means that there literally not much time to play poker or even stream. The only stream I've done is the monthly poker strategy stream, but haven't done any own streams because it's like, if you're not consistent, there's no point. Now what I'm trying to do is to have more consistent streams on the summer, because I'm not working on a day job for the summer. I'm just playing poker, but I just haven't figured out the schedules, and those dogs really affect. I don't know how it goes with them. So we can see that if opponent starts to bet too much, starts to fold too much, the big blind EV starts to go up when we start to check raise a bit more. And I think that's something we can take away straight away when we play the smaller stakes, when people are not balanced. And just if we understand, okay, how do we increase our EV versus those players, then check raising is quite powerful. But when you start to check raise a bit more, then in my opinion, the key to make money is to pay attention when they call, what is their calling range. And sort of pay attention how often they fold. Do they just snap fold? Every time an opponent snap folds, that's a good indicator that he was just tapping the flop. So probably he is overbetting the flop with crap. When they call and hand goes to showdown, then check and think, is that a reasonable call? Some people, I don't know if it's the ego thing, that they don't want to be bluffed. But there's a lot of reps who doesn't want to fold to check raises. And then they call check raises with really weak hands. Like, let's use the normal and let's think about try aces, but let's say, yeah, well, try overpair. He is most likely to fold. With pocket queens, we should fold quite a lot of them. Yeah, pocket pair without the hearts, without the 10, without the 6, without the deuce. So pretty much queens without. Oh, sorry, I have to take this one. No, I was muted. I hope I was muted. Was I? At least my microphone was muted. But there's no secrets, and no reason to edit. What I was saying, yeah, and there were no secrets. Yeah, like pocket queens without a hit on the board, without the flush draw. Then yeah, with cut shots it's a call. But like naked pocket queens, phone during YouTube video, why not? I mean, if it's half an hour video, 45-minute video, well, then 10 seconds on the phone, no problem. No reason to edit. At least I think. I can't see a problem. But here, naked queens should be a fold to a check raise, but I've seen a lot of people to call a check raise with overpair. I am the emperor. A lot of people call me like overpair, like, okay, he will be bluffing me with a 10 or flush draw. And the problem when they call, if there's a bet on the turn, it puts them in a really nasty spot. Yeah, I'm doing coachings. That hasn't changed. So if opponent like calls a check raise with naked overpair without any additional equity, then you know that he's calling a bit too much. And then we need to figure out, okay, how do we fight that? Then definitely we're going to barrel, just shove turn with a lot of good hits and just put pressure on that weak range, but that's a different story. So, let's see that normally, now I have to put these other sims away. So this is the normal without donking strategy. What do we want to check raise? And then if you have any request on what kind of hands or ranges we should check, what is our check raising range, then just let me know. But if we have a flush draw, we can see that we don't really fold those. 3% fold. There are some folds, but very simplified, but we never fold a flush draw here. This is the sim where we check our whole range and then opponent c-bets 50%. So this is normal sim. And with the nut flush draw, it's kind of 50-50 if we raise it or not. Then it's more like, we can see that here we have a lot of those low cards with the nut flush draw. Nut flush draw with the cutter. But then nut flush draw with the higher cutter is often a call. Standard is c-bet 50%. Yeah, this is no donking strategy. Oh, 40%. Sorry. There was this flush draw filter, why I said 50. I always forgot to check the filter. Yeah, it's 41. Sorry. That's they c-bet 41%. And let's compare. Here we have when we c-bet 55, which is closer to truth. And we start to call way more with flush draws, which is kind of strange. But then on the other hand, with the nut flush draw, we check raise 73%. When opponent c-bets a bit too much. When he doesn't c-bet too much, when he c-bets only 40%, then here's definitely the difference. With nut flush draw, it's close to 50-50 strategy. So if you think, what hands do we raise versus higher c-bet that we don't raise versus balanced c-bet, then nut flush draw is definitely one where the frequency starts to go up. Of course, we pretty much check raise all the top sets and then middle sets versus middle sets versus standard c-bet. Yeah, we would have those nut flush draws in our leading range for sure. So now they have to apply the check range, check call or check raise range. Middle set. Oh, I have to sneeze. If I was a professional streamer, I would edit that one out too. Middle set 50-50 versus higher c-bet frequency. We check raise a bit more. With bottom sets, pretty much call versus higher c-bet, it goes 50-50. So yeah, we definitely want to check raise those middle and bottom sets, especially bottom set, a lot more. Now, this is where strategies get complicated, because it's not this simple. This sim assumes that opponent plays GTO approach on the turn and rivers. So even when he c-bets too much on the flop, or he calls too much on the flop, or he folds too much on the flop, then on the turn and river he doesn't do those errors. Now, in reality, even check raising pocket sixes might be way more profitable than check calling with 10, because opponent doesn't barrel the turn probably as often as he should. Quite often people bet the flop, then on the turn they don't have the balls to barrel unless they have a strong hand. A lot of players check back the turn. So if our plan is to check call the flop, to check raise blank turn with middle set, sometimes it doesn't work. And when we check raise the middle set and opponent calls, then often on the turn he overcalls again. Because we all seen, anyone who plays small stakes have seen people who call pot size bets with any flush draw. Or if we use the 75% bet sizing, they call it with 7 high flush draw. Snap call. So that's the problem when we look at the solver sims and think that, okay, this is how we have to play. No, this is how we would have to play if we want to have balance, so that opponent can exploit us. But if the opponent is not good, he's not capable of exploiting us, even if we check raise pocket sixes 100% of times, then sometimes it's way more profitable to be unbalanced ourselves. But we can't put that on the sim, or we could, but that would require a lot of work to force opponent to play badly, and the solver doesn't really handle bad strategies well. Even if we force a frequency, solver tries to be as balanced as possible with that frequency, while in reality the frequency might be really weighted towards certain hands. I hope it makes sense. But we can check where the balance strategy is and then think, do we have any information to deviate? And if we know that, okay, opponent is a bit more call happy than he should, then we know that, okay, our strategy goes from balanced to value betting. Slightly less bluffing, way more value betting. And that's how we should play poker, instead of just trying to imitate and copy solver strategy and think that this is the way to go. It's the way to base your decisions on and have the kind of baseline where we deviate to either way. I don't know if we can deviate to 4 ways, but we can deviate to more passive, more aggressive approach. That's why we should be interested how solver plays, but at the same time we should understand that it's not the best way to make money. And now I just forget where we are. What other hands? What would you check raise on this board? Let's ask this way. On the flop, with what hand you would think, or what range of hands you would think that, okay, let's go for check raise? If we know that opponent is c-betting more or c-betting normally. Shadow Maniac, give us a hand. Ace King Jack 10. Nope. With 4 hearts, it is. So, yeah, definitely. Queen, Queen, then 8. With the hearts. Well, there's definitely a difference. We can see that versus 40% c-bet, it's 50% call, so pretty much it's a fold if we don't have a single heart. And then it's weighted towards calling more than raising, but if opponent c-bets more, we can see that it's weighted towards raising more. Half of the hands, so it's kind of flipped. Here it's 50% call, half of the hands are call and 1/4 is a raise. When opponent bets more, it's flipped. 1/4 is a call, half of it is a raise. But then it's very mixed. There's no tendency when it's a raise, when it's a call, because there's quite similar hands, so it's very mixed strategy, and mixed strategies are always kind of hard. What about Jack Queen 9 5? Are you knowing something I don't? Because I can't see Jack Queen 5 to raise ever on this board, and that's right. It's not. It's a low frequency call on both. It's just crappy hand. But we saw that when we have ace 5-3. No, it doesn't go extreme. Oops. So not flush draw with a cutter. Then this is one of those hands that I told that becomes pretty much a check raise, and versus 40% c-bet, balanced c-betting, there's way more calling. But then when we make it, let's make it a cut shot to the top, we can see that versus balance range it's 40-60, ace king, ace high flush draw with 8-9. Then it's, can we do, does this work? 8, 9, 7, 9, 7, 8. No, it oh, it works. Nice. So this filter is ace high flush draw with 8, 9, 7, 9 or 7, 8. So ace high flush draw with the cut shot. Pretty much that's it. And normally it's kind of high frequency c-bet. We saw that with the 8-9 it's check raises, sorry, not c-bet, check raising. It check raises a bit less, but on average it check raises 70%. But if we use that 8-9 as an example, because I think it has the lowest, it check raises 66%. So there's some calling with the nut flush draw and high cutter. But if opponent c-bets a bit more, boom, 92% check raise. So pretty much, very simplified, we check raise nut flush draw with the cutter 100% of times. Working wonders. But if opponent c-bets way less, only 40%, so it's a flop where he checks back quite often, then we wouldn't be as aggressive with the high cutter. So one thing, even if we don't see at showdown what opponent c-bet, quite easily you can get a feeling like on these boards that doesn't really favor either one's range. There's wide range versus wide range. Then it's kind of board where if opponent starts to check back these boards quite often, then you know that, okay, he understands it. And then probably a lot of his strategies are more towards balanced solver strategies. But if he c-bets here very often, then most likely none of his strategies are really balanced. At least we can assume that. Because it would be... For most players, they don't have the understanding to be balanced on certain spots and then exploit opponents on the other spots. Often, when they have the skills and capability to do that, they probably start to go up and they don't play those really small stakes anymore. Unless there's another reason why they play those. And I don't say it's impossible, I just say that it's more unlikely that it is likely. So it's safe to assume that if opponent is unbalanced in one area, there's a high chance he's unbalanced on other areas too. So you can assume he's unbalanced overall until proven otherwise. And Callan wonders 10-9-9 stop for check raise bluff. Yeah, let's see. 10-9-9. It's actually quite high frequency raise. Overall 43%, and then almost 60% versus higher c-bet. So it's without hearts. So 10-9-9 without, well, it pretty much, if it raises, it pretty much always has 10 on 9 of hearts. But 36, so quite often. But we can see that it's quite often having here we have, it has also 5, 3, a bit more to it. But what if we have the hearts? Yeah. Then we can see that 2/3 is a check raise in both. So it's probably check raise fold. And Shadow Maniac don't have a flush draw, queen then 9-8. So pair and cutter. And I'm quite sure that without hearts it's high frequency call on normal. But starts to check raise a bit more when opponent c-bets a bit too much. So yeah, then another thing is, you need, before you make the check raise, you need to know what do you do if opponent shoves. If you find yourselves check raising this flop, and then opponent shoves, and then you go to tank, what do I do? Then you're doing it wrong. You have to do that decision before you check raise. And then if you have kind of hit on the board, but you don't know what to do if opponent shoves, then probably should just call. So kings and flush draw. I would assume it's high frequency call. Yeah, 80% on both. So with the cutter, especially the long, well, there's a lot of, when you look at the hands here on the raising, they pretty much have the cutter. 5-3, 5-4, 7-8, 8-9. Because that one cut shot gives you a lot of equity in the long run. So let's make it king 10. So king then itself is not automatic check raise. But then if we have let's say king with a cut shot and even some blockers, then I mean overpair flush draw and cut shot, we are in decent shape versus sets. We are pretty much in good shape to stack off versus anything. Well, let's see if we have just the 10 of hearts. Well, that's a good spot. Average, when we have 10 of hearts, normally we raise 60% versus higher c-bet frequency. When we have 10 of hearts, we check raise 70%. So that's pretty much good power card. When you have 10 of hearts, you should be thinking, is there a reason not to check raise? Especially if opponent c-bets too much. But yeah, it's important to understand that when we check raise, we often have to play the turn. If opponent doesn't shove, then what do? And then when we make a light check raise, it puts us in a tough decision on the turn. And that's why often check raise, it's good to have that additional like a cut shot, not flush draw. It gives you a bit more turns that you can just stack off. But yeah, if we make mistakes on them, let's say we check raise the flop with a bit weaker hands, our sort of bottom of our semi-bluffing range, and then we miss the turn and we just fire without thinking, should we fire the turn, we might end up making huge mistakes on the turn or rivers. So it's not that easy that, okay, we just check here, what is our check raising range versus high c-better, and now we print money. It doesn't work that way. We print money if we play the turn and rivers accordingly. And that's why some players go a bit wrong when they just use the vision or PLO trainer or the solver itself and check, okay, how am I supposed to play the flop? When they think that the solver is the way they are supposed to play, that's where they go wrong. So if they just think that, okay, I'm supposed to play flop this way, in PLO, the equity shifts are way higher or way bigger than in Hold'em. And equity shift means that strong hand becomes a weak hand and weak hand becomes a strong hand. Because in PLO, the turn changes the board very often. The nuts change from flop to turn, from turn to river so often in PLO. Like in Hold'em, if you flop, let's say, to 2 pairs, you can have a default strategy of bet, 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 and in the long run you just print money. In PLO, if you flop top 2 pairs and you always go bet, 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 not sure if you even make money in the long run. Because a lot of turns and rivers you might just overplay your hand. So, and in PLO, not all top 2 pairs are the same. Sometimes top 2 pairs is a pretty weak hand, sometimes it's super strong hand. Depends on the board and the other 2 cards. So in PLO, you just can't see, okay, on the flop I do this, and then I continue with this and this on the turn and river, and I print money. No. Sometimes the turn changes the board. You have to be prepared for that. And you have to understand what's the opponent's range, what does my range look like, does opponent give a damn about my range, and so on. So it's not just enough to check the flop strategy, you have to understand how to follow the same logic behind the strategy on the turn and rivers. And that's where poker gets a bit hard and complicated. But yeah, if making money in PLO was easy, then most players would do it. But when you go to the tables, you see that most people are not making money. They are not doing the right decisions. But it's the same in any form of competition. It's not easy to become a winning one. There's no shortcuts. All right. I hope this made sense. I really wish we could have some kind of color coding on the sims, but at least if it made you think, then it was worth it. That's the point. Whenever we start to think about stuff and strategy, that's when we get better. And then using time for that was worth it. But I have to go. The dogs are coming on. I have to make the phone call back. And I have no idea what we're working on next. I haven't figured out. This is the first stream in about a year, so it's fine to see that at least it worked somehow. And I have no idea what we're working on next. There are possibilities like going through hands that I played, using solver, vision, poker choose to do those. Or focusing on spots like these, maybe go to the turn. I think it might be logical here to go to the turn and get a few different turns and see should we barrel or not. And then use, let's say, portals to see if we estimate their continuation range on the turn manually, is it way different than from the solver? So that might be a good way to continue from here. Well, I'm going to post it on YouTube with the phone call in it. So you can check it later if you missed the previous part where I explained the 4 different sims and so on and so on. But thanks. Hope you enjoyed stream and video after a long break, and probably we will continue on the next week at some point with the follow-up to the turn, with different turns that are blanks or complete something, and let's see how should we do that. But have fun. Nice to see people here finding my stream after a long break. So hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time in the following days. Follow on the Discord, follow on the Twitter. You will see when the next stream is. I'm not sure whether it's on Monday, Tuesday, Sunday. I have no idea. But stay tuned. See you then. Bye bye.